Gotcha.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kathleen Callahan. I am a director of philanthropy for the American Cancer Society with donors in Minnesota and Wisconsin. I'm thrilled that all of you for the Advancing Cancer Research Council are joining us today. We've got a good group of folks with us, a good number of ACS staff with us too. I wanted to start, though, by introducing a member of our team and actually our leadership. Dave Benson has joined us to welcome the group and to introduce a new member of our team. We'll do introductions for everyone, but Dave, I'm going to just turn to you. Dave serves as our Executive Vice President for the North Region, and we're thrilled that you're able to join us.
Thanks, Kathleen, and hey, everybody. I just wanted to jump on and do two things. First, just a heartfelt thank you, and then second, I do want to introduce a new team member for our philanthropy team. But I got to start with the heartfelt thank you. This group is incredible and more needed than ever. And I just want to bring us back to one of the biggest things we do at the American Cancer Society is cancer research. And what we do best within our cancer research program is we launch careers. And if you're paying attention to the news right now, you know that our federal government continues to pass continuing resolutions. They're the largest private funder of the largest public funder of cancer research in the world, and those budget dollars are not flowing into our research institutions at a level that I think any of us should be excited about. And so it's put more emphasis and pressure on the American Cancer Society to really deliver on what we do well, which is helping launch careers. And we keep track of this, and we're estimating that 56% of cancer center directors, the ones that run the big NCI designated centers, well, they were funded by the American Cancer Society early in their careers. And 69% of people now survive cancer because we are funding research like that at institutions. And my favorite stat is that 50 Nobel Prize winners can lay claim to having American Cancer Society research early in their careers. So we are an institution that helps keep this research going, which leads to this reduction in cancer mortality and increase in survivorship. And more than ever, it's important that we continue to fund that research, and that's what you guys are doing. And so I can't thank you enough for doing that. It's incredible. And this research council, I think, is a really creative way for us to showcase to important donors like all of you how we're doing that. And I'm excited to see what we can do again this year with this program. So that's my thank you. And then my intro is to welcome Chris Doctor to the American Cancer Society staff team. Chris is our philanthropy lead for the North Region. So she's working directly with me and all of our philanthropy staff across the 17 states of the North Region. Chris, as a wealth of knowledge, she's based out of the Dakotas, so she brings a little bit of geographic diversity for us as well, but has experience with the Susan G. Komen organization, Sanford Health, which is a big health system based out of South Dakota that really does a lot of work in rural health. But we're just really fortunate and lucky to have Chris joining the team. And many of you remember Lisa Stein. So Chris is kind of our new Lisa Stein, for those that remember her name. But Chris, I'd love to turn it over to you to just say a few words.
Great. Well, thank you, Dave. You stole a little bit of my thunder, but what I want to say is I have 3 decades, almost 4 decades of nonprofit leadership in higher ed, healthcare, and a lot in the cancer space. And I'm really excited for this interaction. To see how this all works, but it's such a nice experience, interactive for our donors, and the research that is so critical for what we're doing. And I am here just as a resource, and also thank you for being here today, and excited to get started.
Thanks, Chris. Kathleen, I'll turn it back to you.
Great, thanks, Dave, and welcome, Chris. For the future, we expect Chris may be sort of the host for these events. But as we are making the transition, I thought it would be great to just sort of have all of this kind of played out so you can meet Chris, and then for the next time, I think she will be the one leading our work. Jade, can you put up the slides if you have a chance? Just going to do a couple kind of quick notes. I think it's the next slide. We've already started a little bit of our agenda today with the welcome of Chris and Dave's comments of thanks to the group and bringing everyone together. What I'm hoping that we can do, which I think we did not do in the last call that we had with Dr. Weber, is have an opportunity to introduce those that are a part of this call. We've got a number of individuals from ACS with us. Before we get to Dr. Hurst and his comments, I think it'd be great for everyone to get introduced. I'm going to start, I think, you can probably pull down the slides for right now, Jade. Just to call on the ACS team members to step forward and introduce themselves. We've obviously heard from Dave and Chris, but Dr. Hurst, do you mind if I call on you to go first, just introduce yourself, and I'll do more of an introduction in a minute of you.
Sure. Doug Hurst. I'm in Birmingham, Alabama, and I've been with ACS for almost 2 years. In 2 weeks, it'll be 2 years, and I'm the scientific director for the biochemistry and immunology program.
Thank you. I'm going to go just on my screen. April, I'm going to call on you next.
Hi, I'm April Zubik, the Director of Philanthropy for Missouri and Kansas. I have a couple of donors who are part of the ACRC, and they must have gotten pulled away from work, so they'll be listening to the playback. So I'll be eager for you to meet them on the next call.
Fantastic. David?
Hey everybody, David Yakel, Director of Philanthropy. I sit in Omaha, Nebraska, and I cover Nebraska, Iowa, South Dakota, North Dakota, Wyoming, and Montana. And if you have any other states you want to add on, just go ahead and throw them in there.
Thanks, David. Jade?
Hi, my name is Jade McGrath. You've probably seen my name on some emails coming your way. I am the philanthropy coordinator for the North region, so expect to see my name on some things, some admin things, including the follow-up to this.
Yeah, that's good to know, because Jade, I think, was the initial invitation, sent out the initial invitation, and we'll do all the follow-up work. Sean, you're next on my screen.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sean Vogan. I am based in Chicago, and I'm the principal for the North region. So working on the philanthropy team with the great philanthropy directors across the region. I have that role, as well as working with folks like Doug and the extramural discovery science and discovery team on raising funds to support our research mission. And my background, I've been in doing fundraising in Chicago for 20 some years, and prior to that I had a career in research, so I did cancer research. So it's coming back to my roots when I joined ACS about 9 months ago. Thanks.
Thanks, Sean. Sarah, I think you're on my next screen, but I know you're there.
I'm here and very happy to be here. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Sadid, Director of Philanthropy based in Seattle, and I cover Washington, Oregon, Alaska, and Idaho. And just really happy to be here, and thank you all. I know we can't say thank you enough, and sometimes it may sound like a line, but I hope you feel really proud knowing what a difference you're making, because we could not do this work without you. So thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Kevin, can I go to you?
Yeah, you bet. Hey, everybody, I'm Kevin Can. I'm the executive director for Iowa. My good friend Gary Streit is a member of this group. I don't think he's going to be able to join us today, but I'm sure he'll listen to the recording, and happy to listen in on his behalf. So thank you, guys.
Thanks, Kevin. Zach, how about you? I think you're my last.
There, just had to make sure I was unmuted because I always struggle with these mics. I'm Zach Morris. I'm the special funding manager for the society. So I work with research councils all across the country to identify funding opportunities within our extramural discovery science portfolio for them to fund. And ironically enough, I support the country, but I am based in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Thanks, Zach. And it's wonderful to welcome some of the donors to the ACRC that are with us today. And I will echo the comments that Sarah made about how thankful we are for all of you to join us in this work, which, as Dave said, is so critical, especially right now. Jeff, can I turn to you and just do a quick introduction of who you are and where you are?
Okay, so I'm Jeff Mader. I retired at the beginning of last year. I've been in IT my whole career. Spent 23 years at Target, did a couple of CIO jobs. I spent the last 5 years of my working career at Sun Country Airlines, if you guys know who they are, as the CIO. I also have stage 4 kidney cancer. I chair the Minnesota chapter of the American Cancer Society, though I just moved right across the river to Wisconsin to get away from some of the taxes in Minnesota. And I also founded a group called CIOs Against Cancer. This year we'll raise $1 million for early stage cancer research.
That's incredible. It's a great event last week, and I know some of that continues, Jeff.
Yeah.
And then Rosa.
I have been with the ACS for many years, and I know your predecessors and all the people that spoke today, they're brand new to me. But I think if the work continues, to me, the focus is mainly in provided funds and be able to understand and read the grants, and as we did in the past, and provide our, what we think about it. For at the end of the day, who should be the awardees for such grants. I am more interested in the having as guests speakers at these meetings, as we did in the past, some of the key researchers. Mainly if we are in Minnesota, whoever works at the University of Minnesota and they do the cancer research, to me that is very, very interesting and important. I had a long career at 3M, and I am a technical person. And my first 2 degrees were in chemical and biomedical engineering, and a business degree. So I have traveled all over the world, and I have seen the ravages of cancer in India, in Costa Rica, in China, and everywhere where I travel, because I was in the healthcare business of 3M. So I'm glad to see that there are people fully dedicated. But as I said before, I would like to be able in the future, when you have these meetings, to have some of the key researchers and understand what focus do they have, especially in children. There's some devastating when cancer occurs in children. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosa, for that perspective. There are other individuals that are not able to be with us today, but as a collective, I think the funding that this group is putting together for this year's Advancing Cancer Research Council is $70,000. And with that in mind, I think we've invited Doug Hurst to join us to really be the person to talk about these 4 grants that we sent materials about, I think this morning as a reference, but he's going to walk through these 4 proposals. As Dr. Hurst said, he's been with us for 2 years, and in your background, spent somewhat in academia, if I'm right. And I think you have been an ACS funded researcher. Is that correct, Doug?
That's right.
From like 2011 to 2016. I think that's
right.
That's what I could find when I went digging for information. So not only does he serve as a scientific director of the biochemistry and immunology of cancer program within our extramural discovery sciences department, but he does a lot of work in this space with the grants, with the peer review piece, and also manages the Mission Boost grant program. Some of this may be new to you, but part of the reason we asked Doug to join us today is to talk a little bit about those 4 proposals that I just mentioned, and to talk a little bit about sort of the mechanisms that we use at ACS in that research space. So I know you have a lot to share with us, Doug, so I'm going to just turn it over to you for those comments, but I will make one comment from the rest of us. I think it's probably going to be easier if we all mute our microphones during his presentation. And I don't know, would you prefer if we go off camera, Doug, or what's your preference?
Yeah, you can stay on camera, and I would say feel free to interrupt, raise your hand if you have questions that don't make sense. Interrupt me. We can make this a little bit interactive because this is for you.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. So he's going to go through each of the proposed grants one by one, and after he's done talking about one, we'll just take a quick moment to see if there are questions about those grants, and then we'll move on to the next. And we'll have a little bit of time at the end of the call to do an overall Q&A, whether it's for Dr. Hurst or if it's just questions about this year as we prepare for the voting process. So I think I'll turn it over to you, Doug. Thanks for joining us.
Great. Thanks, Kathleen. And first of all, I want to say thank you to the ACS staff for organizing this. Thank you to the council for volunteering your time and money. And I want to start off by just saying, why am I in Birmingham? You heard Kathleen say I was a funded researcher by ACS. That's the reason I'm in Birmingham. I was at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. It's an NCI designated comprehensive cancer center since the beginning of the NCI program in 1972. And the first major grant that I received was by a research council up in Connecticut, similar to this one. They funded my application that was focused on breast cancer metastasis, some of the molecular mechanisms that are responsible for breast cancer spread. And that was really important. And you heard some of the statistics that Dave Benson threw out, but I want to share just a little bit beyond the statistics and why it's so important to fund these researchers. It is important that we give them money to do their research, but and there is a cutback with NIH. It's really difficult to get funded, not only by NIH but other foundations. And I would say that receiving a grant from ACS gives you a card at the table. What I mean by that is once you have that grant, all of a sudden, other investigators want to collaborate with you. And it really is, it expands your project more so than you can imagine. So now you get this grant, you want to do this work, but now you have other investigators saying, oh, you're funded by ACS. Oh, you've been vetted. You know what you're doing. You're successful. I want to work with you. And so it really gives the opportunity to expand that research. And that's something we don't really capture is the collaborative efforts that come from being a funded investigator. The ACS peer review process is known to be very rigorous. We provide a lot of great feedback to the applicants, and we really do. When you heard that we emphasize setting up people's careers, it's career launching grants and fellowships. We really take an active role in giving them feedback to their applications and helping them along in the process and making their project better, for lack of other words. So I really do want to get into these projects today. I want to give you time to ask questions. If something is not clear, reach out, raise your hand, stop me. If I'm going too much in depth, stop me. If I'm not going in depth enough, stop me. Again, this is for you, for your information. And again, I want to thank you because this is really an important process. I mentioned the peer review process. Before I get started, I just want to talk overall about the applications that came in that are in front of you, it spans a lot of different areas in research, and it's different mechanisms of funding for the investigators. ACS gets last couple cycles, it's been between 900 and 1,000 applications that we have to review. We have to assign 2 scientific reviewers, and then we hold meetings to discuss those applications. It's a lot of work. So how do we do that? These are not requests for specific types of research. This is all investigator initiated, meaning that the investigators submit an application based on what they're doing. And then our job is to assign it to the appropriate peer review study section so we can assign experts in that particular research field. So we have 3 programs right now. One, the more basic program that I work on, the study of molecules, biochemistry and immunology. Then we have the cancer cell biology and preclinical research. And then we have the clinical and cancer control program. So we have 3 scientific directors right now that run those programs, and we're about to add a 4th. Within each of those programs, we have specific peer review study sections where we recruit experts in those particular areas. And so that's how these applications get reviewed. They're reviewed by their peers that understand the science, and then they get feedback where there's things that might be missing, or particular strengths and weaknesses are brought to their attention. So that's the science, and then the different mechanisms that we have in place in front of you. There's 2 that are postdoc fellowships. These are folks that have finished their PhD or MD degree, and now they're just getting some extra training. Some of you are very familiar with this. For those that aren't, this is an important part in their training to become an independent lead investigator. So it really, getting a fellowship from ACS helps to set them up for that next step. The Clinician Scientist Development Grant, there's one of these in your packet. This is for a clinician who does not have substantial amount of research experience, but wants to get involved and start a research program. So this is a faculty member who sees patients, and now they identify a mentor that understands the research a research career that can help them establish a lab and pursue an independent research project. They're a little bit more substantial than just a fellowship because we give money that does go towards salary. It's to make sure that they have protected time to do research in addition to seeing patients. And then they have some money that they can use for supplies, reagents, and whatever they might need for that project. The Research Scholar Grant, we have one of these in your packet. This is set up for an independent investigator, faculty member that's still at the early stage in their career, within 10 years of obtaining their independent faculty position. And this is really a career launching grant. It's comparable to the NIH has their R01 application, or their R01 grant that is the foundation of research grants. And it really, this Research Scholar Grant from ACS really establishes that investigator. And as I mentioned before, that's what really helps in collaborations coming to you. And quite often, I think there's a statistic out there, it's probably on the lines of 70 to 75% of our grantees go on to receive bigger grants, NIH grants, and really establish their research program. So that's what's in front of you. I'll go through each one of these, spend a few minutes on each one on the particular science, but if anybody has questions on those mechanisms and how we do things, I'd be happy to address that now. I know some of you have been on these calls before, you understand this. So if I've gone in too much detail, just say, shut up and continue. I don't see any hands raised, so we'll start off just in the order of your packet. I'm sure everybody's had a chance to really go through and read these applications in depth. You've had 3 hours now. If not, the postdoc fellowships that we have in front of you, we have 2 of them. Matthias Fabregat is the first one from University of Wisconsin-Madison. This is a more molecular-based proposal, very mechanistic. It's elucidating the role of polyamines in cancer-induced loss of adipose tissue. This is an application that is focused on cancer cachexia. Cancer cachexia is muscle and fat wasting. Basically, your body is just eating itself away, and this happens quite often with cancer patients. It's really not well understood how this occurs and why this occurs. There's treatments available, but the treatments are basically appetite, nutrition-based treatments, and they're not that successful. They're helpful, but what is needed is a more in-depth understanding of the mechanisms of how this occurs. Unfortunately, it's a very difficult thing to study. There's not very many models available, and that's just because of the nature of what this is. The muscle and fat wasting away is difficult to come up with models and to study. This group, and this postdoc in particular, have identified a signaling pathway in which the cancer cells are secreting these molecules called polyamines. And these polyamines then are thought to signal to the fat cells, the adipocytes is what they're called, that surround the tumor. And it's now very well appreciated that a growing tumor is not just cancer cells. It's also cells of your body that surround and participate in the growing of that tumor. And in this case, the fat cells, the adipocytes, are a very rich source of signaling for that tumor. And these polyamines secreted by the cancer cells signal to the adipocytes, and then they promote this wasting away. And it's a very metabolic type of research program. They're using some in vitro cell work to understand the signaling, and then they have animal models as well that they can use to better appreciate and understand this. And then their question is, can we now target this signaling pathway to prevent the early loss of the fat and the muscle in your body, so the early stages of cancer cachexia. So any questions about that? It's the one thing I didn't mention, it's focused mainly on pancreatic cancer, but they also use head and neck and lung cancer models. But it's most likely something that can be applied towards many other types of cancer. It's more of a general mechanistic type of proposal. Pause for a second or two, and I see a hand raised. Rosa, do you have a question or comment?
No, just a question. I just wanted to know, when are we going to do is this the review of the grants? And today we're voting, or is later on? Maybe it's
I can ask, or I can answer that. We're going to talk through all 4 grants today, and then we're going to send out a kind of a way to vote online. And I think if I remember the dates here, I just want to make sure I'm looking at my notes. We're going to send out this recording as well as the link to the voting mechanism by May 6th, which is next Monday. And then you'll have until May 15th to think about what you'd vote for. So if there's a question in that period of time, and we can ask Dr. Hurst to give us some perspective. So there's we're not limited to today. We're not voting today, especially because a number of the members of the council are not with us. So this is just sort of the preview, and then we'll have some time to reflect on the materials as well as ask any questions. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does, because I somehow I remember the meetings used to last for an hour. So according to that, I have my schedule until 1.
Yes,
Because-
that's correct.
Okay, so yeah, it's pretty much the same process than before. Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Doug, I was going to mention that what you described seems very familiar to me. I've had cancer for stage 4 cancer for 6 years now. And before the cancer, I worked out a lot, was pretty muscular and athletic, and I weighed 210 pounds, and now I weigh 180 pounds dripping wet and feel like I've lost a lot of my strength and, coordination and stuff like that. I don't know, my butt muscles aren't big enough to keep my pants up anymore. And so it's kind of frustrating because I still try to work out and gain some of that back, but it seems like it's a losing battle.
Yeah, I think this is a real issue, cancer cachexia, and there's a trend towards more studies getting at the mechanism of why this is occurring. Again, it's just been a very difficult thing to study because it's not a process that just occurs quickly. It takes time. I think as you've seen, it's doesn't happen overnight. It's a long process, and it's, just literally wasting away. That's not an easy thing to model.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to move on to the next proposal, another postdoc fellowship. This one is out of University of Minnesota. Ali Arifa. This is a liquid biopsy-derived proteogenomic biomarker for 177 lutetium PSMA 617 radioligand therapy in patients with prostate cancer. That's a mouthful. What the heck does this mean? So this is focused on prostate cancer. Prostate cancer, as you know, or maybe you don't know, as long as it's isolated to the prostate, we have nearly 100% survival for those patients. It's when it spreads and metastasizes is when we really are concerned with prostate cancer. And this proposal focuses on identifying biomarkers for a specific treatment that is not always successful. So this 177 Lu PSMA 617 is an approved treatment for prostate cancer, for metastatic prostate cancer. And what it is it's a radioactive isotope of lutetium. It is designed where this radioactivity is attached to a molecule that recognizes PSMA, which is prostate-specific membrane antigen, that is oftentimes expressed on metastatic prostate cancer cells. And so the idea is that you target this radioactivity specifically to those prostate cancer cells, and it works a lot of the time, but for some patients, it doesn't work. This proposal is designed to understand the biomarkers that give rise to when this treatment works in those patients and to those that don't work, the non-responders. So essentially, they're comparing responders to non-responders and looking at what is in these cells, what is being secreted by these cells, what can we identify so that we can better understand why patients are responding to the treatment and why patients are not. And then once we know that, now we can, there's a number of things that can come from this. One, we can identify other treatment strategies once we know what's being expressed. And also we can use these as biomarkers to better understand what patients are likely to respond or not respond. And so, the first application I presented to you was very basic mechanistic type. This one is now more what we call translational research. It's using patient samples from those that have been treated, collecting those samples, using techniques to identify what's being expressed both within those cells and what's being released into the bloodstream. Any questions about that? So again, both of these are postdoc fellowships. These are, setting individuals up to where they can transition to develop their own independent studies. So when we review these, we do look at the project, the research that's being conducted, but we also look at what type of environment they're in, what has their mentor been successful with training them to get to that next step? Is this an individual that's likely to continue on with their research and develop a successful career? And so for both of those applications, they were viewed as outstanding in all those aspects. So I'm going to move on to the Clinician Scientist Development Grant. As I mentioned, this is to launch the research career for a clinician scientist. This is a faculty member. The one we have in front of us is Angela Steineck, CAR-T Plus, a pilot supportive care intervention for children during CAR-T cell therapy. This application now is moving into the space of our clinical program. This is geared towards patient-reported outcomes. It's ALL, acute lymphoblastoid leukemia, for pediatric patients specifically. It's now pretty well known that those patients that are receiving CAR T cell therapy, this is chimeric antigen receptor T cell therapy. So it's a cell-based therapy. It's approved. It's the standard of care for these kids, but it comes with a lot of anxiety for both the patient and the parents and the family. And this leads to adverse healthcare outcomes. There's a lot of lifestyle events, stress, anxiety that comes with CAR T cell therapy because there's a lot of physical side effects that come with this therapy, and there's a lot of uncertainty. And so this particular project is trying to develop a strategy where they can eliminate those anxieties and improve the welfare of not only the patients, the kids, but also the parents and families that are a part of this process. And so what they're doing, they had already done a preliminary study where they talked to patients and parents at 3 different institutes. Their preliminary data, I believe it came from Wisconsin, the Children's of Wisconsin, Seattle Children's Hospital, and NCI. And now what they're proposing is to refine this program. It's an educational program. It's self-directed for the patients and the parents. They want to refine this at 3 sites, and that's still at Children's in Seattle, but also extend this to St. Jude's. And so in that first step, they're going to refine the program. And then in the second step is evaluate the intervention for this program. Again, this is geared towards the stress that comes with the uncertainty of CAR T-cell therapy for pediatric ALL patients. So a much more clinical type of research program. As I mentioned in the very beginning, we fund all aspects of cancer research. So now you've seen 3 different aspects: the very basic mechanistic, we've seen the preclinical and translational, and now you're seeing very much the clinical space and different mechanisms of how we're funding individuals. Any questions on this application? I'll move on to our last one. This is a research scholar grant. This is our largest research grant for individuals. This is Elise Alspec from St. Louis University. It's sex disparities in cancer immunoediting. So we're going to go back now to a basic mechanistic type of research proposal. This one is also an immunology based proposal. What's been noted is that what we understand is that there's a difference between the immune system of females versus males. What we don't know is how those immune systems are really responding to cancer progression. In the majority of cancers, females tend to be less susceptible, and I use that word susceptible loosely. In this particular proposal, what they're saying is that females' immune system is more adept at recognizing tumor cells when it's first initiated, and they can fight that. They can kill those tumor cells, recognizing it as non-self. So you have a robust immune system fighting that cancer, preventing it from growing. But then there's a second aspect to this, and that is in males, they tend to have a more robust system. Once cancer progresses and escapes the immune system, they're more likely to be able to fight off those tumor cells that have escaped initially. So a very interesting proposal is they're trying to understand mechanistically, why would it be that initially the onset of cancer, the female immune system is more adept at recognizing the non-self cancer cells and killing them, but then allowing the escape of once that cancer has progressed. And then that plays into the overall survival of these patients, where it's thought that that women, once cancer has progressed, have a better survival than men. So there's a lot to unpack with this proposal, and what they're doing is they're using some cell-based work along with animal models to really get at the mechanisms of why this might be. For this proposal, it's mainly melanoma. A lot of this is not really site-specific cancer because it could be applied to other cancers. But melanoma is a predominant one that they're using. Any questions about that one? And not to give any extra plug for any of these, Elise Alspec, I heard her speak just a couple of weeks ago at a cancer conference in San Diego. It was really a treat as she's navigating through the beginning of her career, and her career is taking off. To see her present the data that is in this proposal was quite a treat. It's an interesting project. And I think we have we have plenty of time. I kind of went through that, I think, relatively quickly. It's probably a lot to unpack since you haven't had that much time to look over these. But I'm happy to answer questions.
So I've got a quick question. Which of these are closest to getting to the point where they would be a marketable product that would be used to treat patients?
That's an interesting question. There's the marketable product is one that I might not be able to address, but obviously the CSDG, the Angela Steineck, is evaluating patients at one level and developing an intervention based on her research. That's very different. That's very different than developing a product to intervene. There's the biomarker study. They're looking at patient samples where there's an approved treatment and understanding, what is different between a responder versus non-responder. As far as, do they have something in mind? Well, not yet. There's not a product because they're still looking at the biomarkers of what is expressed. The other two are much more mechanistic to set the foundation. And whenever you're doing a foundational study, and I think we talked a little bit about this maybe in the CIO's meeting. I think you were on that.
Yep, I was.
Yeah. So, when we talk about those foundational grants, that could be as early as a few years to develop something. It could be 20 to 25 years down the road. It's hard to say, just depending on where the project goes. But it's setting the foundation to be able to move in that step.
Yeah. Because I always sort of think about it in terms of how fast to market where it can start saving lives. And then I think about it kind of on the how broad will the outcome be? Will it affect just a specific cancer or will it be applied to all of it? So that would be my other question is, if you look at these four, which are broad reaching?
Yeah, and I think there's a few of these that definitely the ones that are much more foundation reach across multiple cancers and can really affect a lot of patients versus, Steineck is specifically focused on pediatric ALL, but, in the other proposal that is looking specifically at prostate could be far reaching, at least in that setting, could be impactful. And one of the things I did not mention that I thought of now that you talk about a product to market, these are all investigator initiated, and a lot of times it's just it's focused on either developing or continuing to develop their research program to continue on. So it's typically these are more long-term projects. We do now have a couple of other mechanisms that are focused more on either clinical enabling, going bench to bedside that you're talking about, or taking something to commercialization. And we don't have any of those applications in front of you. The Mission Boost grants are those that we fund specifically to take something bench to bedside. It has to be something that goes into patients within 2 years after getting funded. The other mechanism that we just put in place that you might be interested in, we've just gotten our first round of applications, so they're not yet ready. We haven't even reviewed those yet, is something called Accelerator. And this is, the cost is $75K for a year. The idea of the Accelerator is to give somebody a little bit of a boost, something to get them over the hump, to take something to commercialize it. What's that one missing piece that they need to get over the hump to be able to commercialize it? And whether it's getting to the point of intellectual property or patent application, getting closer to a startup company to get something to market very soon. So we have some of those mechanisms that we've put in place. We've had a number of applications that just came in with a deadline of April 30th. We have others that will be rolling in up through August. But we're excited about both of those programs to get at what you're saying, more so than these investigator-initiated projects. So I don't know if that helps to answer. I mean, I know what you really want to know, are any of these ready for prime time to market? My short answer is probably not. Go
Thank
ahead,
you.
Reza. I think you have your hand up.
Yes, more often a general question is there is a lot of research in the different categories that you describe all over the country, all over the world. Well known, for example, pancreatic cancer, prostate cancer, ovarian cancer, blood, so forth. But there are other cancers, and they many times they are treated and they survive. In the case of pancreatic cancer, maybe 2 or 3 years. In the case of a gallbladder cancer, there's no solution. So cancers, like they are, the patient, by the time they discover that cancer, like glioblastoma, like gallbladder cancer, like Paget's disease, there doesn't seem to be much research doing that. Glioblastoma probably has now taken up to the next notch because of children. Now they are showing glioblastoma in children rather than the elderly adults. Why is that? The researchers are not interested in tackling these diseases that are so painful and decimating. What is why so many are looking into so much money in, say, prostate cancer or breast cancer? And of course, we see the results of breast cancer research and prostate, how much already have been able to save lives. So,
Rosa, thank you so much for that question. It's actually a very complicated question, but I'm going to answer it. There's lots of variables, and that's what makes it complicated. So to start off with, I think one of the questions that you had is, if you look at the portfolio in ACS, or if you look at the portfolio at NIH, the majority of the funded research is in breast cancer. There's a lot in prostate cancer, as you said. There's lung cancer. Those predominate. And one of the reasons for that, there's just more researchers in that space. And what happens is they develop models to study the disease, and then other people can build on those models. And so we have much more model systems, say in breast cancer, than we do in some of the more rare tumors. And so it becomes an issue of, if you're studying a rare disease or a rare cancer, the resources to study that are much fewer, and there's much fewer people in that space. So it's much more difficult to get results. It takes longer. Part of your research is building the models to do this. And so that's like the first part of your question, I think, is why so many people in one particular type of cancer research versus another. It just comes down to resources and how many people are working in that space. And then you can think about, too, the training pipeline for this research. Someone gets trained because they're working. There's so many people in breast cancer, for instance, and now you have trainees in each of those labs, and then they become experts in that area, and it's natural for them to continue in that area. The resources are there. They build more resources, and it just expands more and more. It's not to say that that cancer is more important than another cancer or people care more about that cancer. It comes down to research being able to be funded because you have the ability to tackle questions because the resources are there. There are a lot of folks studying the rare cancers, and there's a lot of programs across the country. Glioblastoma was one you mentioned. There's a lot of people that are dedicated, and there's a lot of resources being developed in that particular space. And still today, as you said, the survival for those patients has not changed significantly in the past couple of decades, I would say. It remains, I believe, less than a year. And so it doesn't mean that people are less interested. It just means there's less people and less resources to study it. The other thing I'll just mention, when someone's developing a research program, you have to think about how you're going to get funded for that research. It would, in an ideal world, you could just pick a topic and say, I want to study this. But then what it comes down to is someone willing to give you money just to try things. And institutes do not provide, they will give you some initial funding to start your research program, but then it's up to you to get funding. And so you have to propose things that are feasible.
As a researcher.
As a researcher, because otherwise you won't survive in that research space if you can't continue to get funding. So what a lot of people do, I've seen this happen a lot, is they don't just have one research program. Maybe you study breast. Maybe that's what you started with. You're developing a research program with breast cancer in mind, and you're getting money for that program. And at the same time, you start something else, and you might get some pilot funds to start a project, and then that starts to build. It's a bit more difficult, I think, to have multiple types of projects going on in your lab, but that's been done, and people have been successful at doing that. I know that was kind of a lot. I don't know if I've
No, I understand.
said too much, but
yeah, because like a breast, let's take breast cancer. 50 years ago, breast cancer, you have breast cancer, you are dead. And then the research study, and then there was more interest, I think is the public demand, then the many cases coming all the way that it was not only in women 4 years and older, but it started all the way from 20, 25-year-old women. So it takes time, but I think it's for the ACS, it's time for us to start with you people, the physicians, the researchers, and the healthcare area said, there are these, start thinking about it. This is the new generation of cancer that we need to, because it starts showing more and more, like glioblastoma. I mean, it was, I wasn't aware 15 years ago about glioblastoma. Now it's becoming more and more common, especially when it went all the way to young children. So no, your explanation, I understand. I think it's take time, and it's the researchers that have to be brought up to by you, the elderly, how the elder, I think, to challenge the young researchers.
And Rosa, the other part of this that I didn't mention is some of the processes that are so important in cancer are difficult to model in a system. And for instance, the cancer cachexia. Why don't we have lots of model systems in cancer cachexia? Metastasis is another one. Metastasis is a long process. So to get at mechanistic studies in those areas, the model systems take time. Aging in cancer is another one. a model system, it takes a long time. And meanwhile, let's say you develop a model system, it's a 2-year model system. Well, meanwhile, you need to publish your papers in order to maintain your lab and to get more funding. So if your systems take that long to develop and to get results, then your process to publication and to getting more funding just takes longer, and it's much slower to develop.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yes, thanks, Doug, for your perspective, both on the 4 grants that we talked about and sort of overarching in the way that you helped us kind of connect, whether it's mechanistic or if it's translational, all those things. I feel like I have learned a lot today, and I hope for the full group that you feel the same way. Jade, can I ask you to put up the slide just about next steps? I know we're right at time, so I'm going to just be very sort of quick about resolving sort of the next steps with this group, and this will hold true for those that are with us and those that weren't able to join us today. We will send out this recording. We'll send out again another copy of the materials that were sent this morning about the 4 individual grants, and then the voting link for everyone to sort of evaluate. We're asking that people submit their responses of voting by May 15th, and then we will announce the project that's been chosen from this group from that vote on the 17th of May. So those are the next steps for this group. I want to also just mention that we're hoping to get this group together kind of quarterly throughout the year. So August of this year, November, and then February of 2025. I think that Dr. Hurst has given us an amazing launching point to understand some of the potential work that we can support. I want to say thank you to you for your knowledge and perspective. It's a lot of information for us to take in. And for Rosa and Jeff, if there are questions that come from looking at the materials more, feel free to reach out. And same thing for all of those that are watching this, to help us understand any questions you might have so we can help in this process. And then really finally, and another time to say thank you for your support for the American Cancer Society, for this amazing work that's going on, and your interest in learning for the American Cancer Society and the ACRC, the Advancing Cancer Research Council. I think that covers it. Did I miss anything from the team? Just to make sure I know we are over time, so I just want to say thank you for providing those extra 4 minutes, and especially to our special guests today and those that are new. We're really thankful for your participation. So have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank
Thanks,
you. Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thanks, Kathleen. Bye.